The one thing I always will never forget, it came from the movie, and it was during when we were filming with the Red Room and all this stuff, and I got a call on the walkie-talkie, and they're like, Gregg, David wants you on the walkie-talkie. And I was up in my office, they were on the set filming, and all of a sudden David gets on the walkie, which he never did, and so I'm like, what's gonna go on? Something's going on. He goes, clicks the thing, like, shh, you there? You know, I'm like, yeah, I'm here, David. He's like, Gregg, what I'm going to need next is a baby pig's fetus. And I'm like, what did he? I don't need it today, but I'm going to need it tomorrow or the next day. I need a baby pig's fetus. And I was like, I learned not to ask him for what. He needed it, right? He needed it. And my staff got together. I called them all, guys, we need a pig's fetus. And they got it together, and they found some college in the Midwest that deals with baby pig fetuses. They came up to me, and they were like, does he want a red one, or a pink one, or a black one? So my favorite moment was getting David on the walkie-talkie. Get him back on the walkie. And he gets on, like, David, you want a red one or a pink one? He goes, when can I have it? I said, tomorrow. He goes, send me both. I couldn't tell you what he used it for. It was something that somebody with a fingernail looking like it was peeling meat back or skin back or something. But crazy. I mean, that's the kind of fun we had on the show. The thing that takes me. There were lots of moments, that's for sure.
And by the way, if you guys want to ask a question, just line up at the microphone.
One of my favorite things that happened was working with Piper when she was acting as a Japanese businessman. And because my brother was working on the set as well, he ended up being her assistant, Derek Shimatsu, for Fumio Yamaguchi. And they actually made up a bio for her at Mark's request. And when they were trying to keep everything quiet, and Matt Roush at that time was working for USA Today, Mark had me posing as a translator who was going to be there at a meeting with Fumio. So Matt's standing there, and he's sitting there and waiting for this actor. And then the actor calls in, the Japanese accent, and he's just like, I'm saying, I'm sorry, Fumio can't make it. He's not going to be able to come for your interview. I'm so sorry. And Matt's trying to keep it under control because it's a big thing that he came to our offices for the first time, and he's like, oh. So finally, he's getting ready to leave, and all of a sudden, Piper Laurie came into the room as Piper, and he's like, oh, well, hello, and he's being polite. And she's like, well, don't you recognize me? I know who you are. You're Piper Laurie. And then she starts talking in that guttural voice, and he turned red and then white and couldn't speak for a moment. That was one of my favorite moments on the show, and he did a piece on it that I still have. And it's actually one of Piper's favorite moments on the show, and she also included it on her in her autobiography. But it was something that Mark cobbled together that worked really, really well. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, Piper specifically wanted to come in after that whole storyline because she loved it so much.
I'm in touch with her constantly, and she was thrilled. I actually found the bio I had typed, and I used my brother-in-law's name. It cobbled together. It came out as Fumio instead of Fumitaka, but she loved it. It worked really well for her, and I'm really happy because it still brings her great pleasure. She gets a chuckle thinking she put it over everyone.
I just have one quick David Lynch story, because it was a good one. It was the day I went over there to see the cut of Who Killed Laura Palmer, and he was working on a coffee table book of spark plugs. And actually published an entire work of spark plugs, the history of spark plugs, and it was the entire book. And he said, take a look. And so I'm flipping through it, and the whole thing is just spark plugs. But in the center of the book it's a double, it's the only color photo in the book, and it's of his kitchen. And it's of ants coming out of the window to a potato that had sugar in it, and then going back out the window. And I said, David, what does this have to do with anything? He said, well, he said, I figured a book on spark plugs could get pretty boring. So this is kind of like an intermission so that you can take your mind off of spark plugs. I'm gonna shut up.
Well, if I may, without revealing anything, I just want to let people know that there will be some special things going on in the next part of the rest of the series, and I think that will bring a lot of happiness, I hope.
Paula's bringing some of her work, and it's really amazing. I've seen it. We're also working with Josh Eisenstadt, who is very generously loaning some of his private collection of Twin Peaks props, which are also going to be quite amazing to see. So there's a lot to sort of look forward to in the next couple of weeks, in addition to watching more of the show.
Right. So whenever I get my book's done, we'll see more.
Definitely. Richard, Carl, anything?
Yeah. I think 2 years after Twin Peaks stopped, I was in Romania for 2 feature films, and they had, just a few years ago, they had gotten rid of their dictator, Ceausescu, and his wife. And one of the very first shows that and it was completely isolated country. They had no idea what was going on in the rest of the world. But one of the first shows that came to Romania was Twin Peaks, probably pirated or whatever. And it was shown on national TV, and it was a huge hit. And so I would ask around, and I would say, what did it do for you? Why was this such a big hit in Romania? And they said, well, this was our life. This was how it was.
I have a couple of other just little notes. One of the things that I was most proud about is that I actually introduced recycling to the Double R Diner, and did a lot of charitable events, like for Free People and a lot of things like that, to make sure that we were giving back to the community. And it was a lot of fun for cast and crew to do those type of events. So even though we had a short-lived life, we really did a lot to help out and bring awareness, not just to the show, but we had really great cast and crew who would like donate jewelry or that they made, or all types of things. And so we always had a lot of fun. We worked really hard, and have some of the best people, who were involved with the show.
It seems like the longevity of the show continues to produce amazing things, including the episode of Psych with Lenny and Dana Ashbrook and Ray Wise and others. And so what was that like? I know James Roday is a big fan of the show. How did that episode come to be?
I think it was just his obsession that started when he was 13 years old, I think, in San Antonio, Texas. And he told me he wanted to be Bobby, that character. And so that's how it just sort of manifested from that. And they all had such affection for it. And so it was just a great excuse to see everybody again. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Bobby, any stories from the set?
It was just it's so interesting to hear you guys talk about it as network and producers, because it was really, and I think this is a thing that has sustained Twin Peaks is that it was just magical. I mean, David, though the process working with David as an actor was very exploratory, and he allowed you the process of discovery with him, he was absolutely in command, and you were completely, you felt super comfortable and safe, and that was magical. And the set was magical, coming off of Van Nuys Boulevard, and like you said, all that wood, like huge. I remember the planks, the really wide planks. Like that, the whole thing was just a magical experience. Getting to work with so many directors like Caleb Deschanel and David. And to remember working with Diane Keaton, and it was Annie Hall. I just remember her going, okay, cut. No, wait, no. It was just fantastic. Like, yeah, it's just a really great experience.
I will say this about the way the crew at least worked certainly in the first, season and deep into the second. Every time a script came out, because we were the lucky ones who got to see it before anybody else, right? Everybody would get the script, and as soon as you could read it, everybody would read it, and none of us cared how we were going to make it. All we cared about was, why is Joan Chang going to be wearing a red dress in this one? We were the first fans, and it was all about like what it was. And then after a couple of days, we all like catch our breath and go, okay, now we got to figure out how we're going to do this. But it was when you have a crew doing that, you have a hit on your hands. And I've been able to, my whole career, I can tell when a show's going to work and not based on how the crew behaves. But no crew's ever behaved the way they did on this show. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why when I got involved with shooting, even though that wasn't my job description and it took a lot of time, it was very expensive for me personally, I just felt like there was no one else really who could capture photographically or direct people who are going to be shooting photos, whether it was publicity, marketing for ABC or me or some of the other photographers, to make sure they were portraying something that was real, that was, making sense to the fans, even though it may not have happened yet. Just making sure the shots were set up and they weren't just regular heads on a photo. And I think that was another thing that set us apart already for our production, is that we had a totally different background. And it started with Mark and David with their vision. And the rest of this team that would just not even know what they're supposed to do, but just go with the flow and do whatever they could to make it a great production. So we were really lucky and worked hard.
Yes.
Hi, thank all of you for coming. The issue was mentioned a couple times of actors, people being tired, and I've had it happen as a director where it gets to be 4 o'clock in the morning and the acting starts to suffer accordingly. So what did all of you do, and what did David Lynch do to keep the acting honest and real when everybody's really tired? Because the work throughout is excellent, so what did you do to maintain that excellence in the acting?
I can remember one night very well. It was actually for the film, Fire Walk With Me, and we recalled that it was 9 in the morning, and we didn't get around to this one scene between Laura Palmer and Harold Smith until maybe 2 in the morning, and David screams across the set, "Deepak, never schedule the most important scene for 2 a.m. And now that's a little bit of poetic license on his part, because it's how to get very exhausted actors up for the scene, and indeed it worked, and it was a very intense scene. And after it was over, very late in the evening, out of the corner of my eye, I saw this tall leprechaun version of a jig, and it was Mr. Lynch celebrating whatever went down just there, and not just saying, okay, that's it, moving on, There was a moment of acknowledgement, of celebration, of exploration of something that's rare in TV now. I didn't know it at the time, how rare, but that's a memory. Yeah.